Hello everyone. So today we are going to discuss about YAML. Okay. So the first question which we need to understand why we need to learn YAML. Okay. This is the first question which we need to understand why we need to learn YAML. Okay. I'd say if you are learning anything in Docker or in Kubernetes, in Ansible, Helm, CI/CD, or also any DevOps tools, any DevOps tools, if you're learning, what you have to write a configuration files. Okay, and what is the main purpose of this configuration file is to connect to our target APIs. If you are working on Docker, then you need to interact the Docker APIs. The same thing for Kubernetes, Ansible, Helm, CI/CD, or DevOps tools, like any other DevOps tool. What eventually you want to interact, we want to interact to the target APIs. And if you are going to write this configuration file in plain English, do you think it would work? Means in a plain English, I'm going to write whatever I want to create in Docker or in Kubernetes or any other DevOps tools. Do you think it would work? My answer is no. Okay. So what we need to do, we need to use a data serialization language. Okay, so what is the main purpose of data serialization language? The main purpose of the data serialization language is to interact to our target APIs. Okay, and one of the base data serialization language which we have is YAML. Okay, apart from YAML, we have two more data serialization language. One it is JSON, and the third one is XML. Okay, but if you compare the usage of the other data serialization language, YAML has the mostly used in the data serialization. So the next question come into our mind, why we need to use YAML in comparison to the other data serialization language like JSON and XML. Already written this JSON and XML file. Let's do a quick comparison between them. Okay. I've opened my Visual Studio Code. And let me open. The first file is regarding the YAML. The second file which we have, it is regarding the JSON one. And the third file which is open, it is for XML. Okay. So if you see in this YAML, JSON or XML file, what we are trying to achieve, we have mentioned the same content. Okay. In terms of microservices, and then we have passed some key and value. But in terms of reading the file, which one you feel like it will be more easier? YAML, JSON, or XML? According to me, the answer is this one. In terms of reading and understanding the file, YAML is a straightforward. Why? The other case of writing also, if you're going to write the XML or JSON file, it would be a bit complicated. Why? Because JSON works on the principle of curly braces. Okay. The second one, XML works on the principle of tags. But the YAML only works on the principle of indentation. Okay, we are going to have a very detailed discussion. What is indentation? How we are going to achieve it? But right now we need to focus only one thing. In comparison to JSON and XML file, in terms of reading or writing the file, YAML is more user friendly. YAML is more user friendly. That's why YAML is widely used in writing the configurations. Yeah. So let's have more discussion regarding the YAML file. What is the full form of YAML and what is the syntax of YAML? So YAML initially used to be called as yet another markup language. Okay. So initially it used to be called as yet another markup language. But as I have mentioned, YAML is widely accepted in data serialization language. That's why its new full form is YAML is in markup. Okay. One more thing. Whenever we are writing our YAML file, if you are mentioning .yml or .yaml, both of them are correct. We are good to mention as .yml or .yaml. Both the extensions are. So till now, what we have discussed is regarding the uses of YAML in terms of DevOps tools. The second one which we have discussed is what is data serialization language. Then we discussed why YAML is popular in comparison to JSON or XML. And the fourth one which we have discussed, what is the full form of YAML and its extension. Okay, so our main goal is to write the configuration file and to interact to our target APIs. Okay, and as I have mentioned, before learning any technology of the target APIs, Docker, Kubernetes, Ansible, Helm, or any other DevOps tools, what we have to firstly understand the YAML. Then we would be able to write the configuration file, and the end goal of the configuration file is to connect to our target APIs. Okay, so the next important thing which we need to discuss is the syntax of. The first syntax is keep value. Okay, if you are writing anything in YAML file, I would say my name colon Akash, then this one will be treated as key and value. If I'm going to mention my age as 25, then this one will be treated as key and value. One more thing, whenever we are mentioning value, we are good to pass the string inside the single inverted comma, or we are good to pass the string in double inverted comma. Both of them are fine. Okay. The second syntax of YAML is the comments. If you want to pass any comments in YAML file, what we have to use? We have to use the pound sign. And whatever the things we are going to mention after the pound sign, it will be treated as, okay. So let's do a quick demo to understand key value pairs and comments. We are good to mention .yml or I think I already have the file. So let me mention 123 to make it unique. And we are good to mention .yml or .yaml file. Let me close the YAML files. So I'm going to mention my name, colon, and Akash, and my age, colon 25. So what the first thing I have mentioned, this thing, it would be called as key. Whatever the things we are going to have in the left hand side, it will be treated as key, and the right hand will be treated as value. Okay. And here what I have mentioned the value without the inverted comma. We are good to mention in single inverted comma or in double inverted comma. All three values are correct. Okay. The second one which we have discussed is passing the command. I'll say I want to provide some information regarding this name key. So what I will do, I will use this as sign and then I'll mention name of the user. Okay. In the same way, if I want to pass the comment for the age, I will mention as sign and age of the user. So this is the two basic syntax of YAML which we need to understand. Apart from this, we have the other syntax also. But firstly, I want to discuss regarding one of the important topic which I mentioned at the time of comparison between XML and JSON and YAML is indentation. So exactly, what is the exact meaning of indentation? Okay, let's take an example. We have one folder called documents. Okay, and inside this document folder, I have one folder name called as resume. Okay, and inside this resume, I have resume dot doc file, and I have one more folder called as photos. Okay, and here I have file called as akash.py. Okay, are you able to understand what I'm talking about? We have one folder called documents, and inside this document, we have two folders, resume and photos. Okay, if you want to write the YAML file for this one, so what would be the process? So let me open the Visual Studio Code and explain it. I'm going to create a file name called as indentation dot. I'll mention YAML. As I have mentioned, both the syntax are correct. So I'm going to mention here, I'll mention documents, okay, because documents is my parent folder. And inside this document, I have two more folders. One is resume, and inside this resume, I have a file name called as resume.doc, and another folder which I have, which is photos, and here I have a cast.png. Okay, so here comes very interesting question. We have the document folder, document folder, and inside this documents folder, what we have? We have resume and photos folder. But if you see here, the documents, resume and photos, all of them are on the same level. So if we are going to go through this YAML file, according to this YAML file, this is not the hierarchy. The hierarchy is we have one documents folder, and apart from the documents folder at the same level, we have one more folder called resume and I would say photos. Okay, all the three folders are present on the same level. To represent the resume and photos folder are present inside the document, what we have to follow? We have to follow a proper indentation. So the right in YAML file for this one, it would be documents colon. Then we have to follow proper indentation. So what is the exact meaning of indentation? The meaning of indentation is a space. Okay. So line number 8, I'm going to place one space. See, one space is present. I'm going to mention resume column, resume dot, and the second one I'm going to mention photos dot akash dot png. So this one is correct. Why? Because we have followed the proper indentation. Means we have followed the proper spacing to show document is our main folder, and inside the documents what we have the resume and photos which is present inside the document. And to mention that resume and the photos, both of them are at the same level, we have mentioned the same space at the photos also. If we are going to mention, I would say, like this, do you think it is correct? The answer is no. Why? Because we have not followed the proper indentation, proper spacing to show resume and photos are present on the same level. Or else, if I'm going to mention like, sorry, there's an issue while copying. Let me copy it again. If I'm going to mention like this, do you think it is correct? It is 100% correct. Why? Because if we have taken 1, 2, 3, 4 space, we have followed the same spacing for photo also. Okay, which means resume and photo folder, both of them are on the same level. So this is the perfect example of indentation. Whenever we create any YAML file, we have to make sure we are following the proper indentation. If we are not going to follow the proper indentation, our whole YAML file will be wrong like this. Okay. So let's continue our discussion with the other syntax of YAML. Third syntax is object. Okay. So what is object? Object is a collection of key and value. Okay. If we are going to mention first underscore name colon, and I'm going to pass my name as Akash. Okay. And I'm going to mention last underscore name colon Kumar. Then both the two values are key and value. This is the part which we have already discussed. So the next thing is, what is an object? If I'm going to mention here as users colon, then this user will be called as object. Okay, and what it has? It has the collection of key and value. Okay, the fourth syntax is, okay, so what is the exact meaning of Boolean? In the last example, we have mentioned about object, we have mentioned about the key, we have mentioned about the another key. Okay, but the values are in the string. Okay, if I'm going to mention age, it would be in number. So if I'm going to mention is underscore email underscore verified, let me clear it, write it again, verified colon. So what we are going to mention, either true or false. Okay, apart from true, we have one more option called yes, and we have one more option called false. So overall, to mention true, we have two more options. In the same way, for false, we are good to say no or off. Okay, so it means, we write it again. So we have false, we have no, and we have off. All three of the thing means the same. So let's do a quick demo to understand object and boolean. I'll mention objects dot YAML. So as I mentioned, if I'm going to mention first underscore user colon Akash, sorry, I'll mention here first underscore name colon Akash. I'll mention last underscore name. It would be colon as Kumar. Age I will mention colon 25. So what is an object? The collection of key and value, it would be called as object. So all these things are defining about what? It is defining about the user. I mentioned user underscore details column. Okay. So this one, it would be called as an object. Okay. And as we have discussed, all these three values, it would be called as key and value. But YAML work on the principle of indentation. Indentation. So do you think this one is correct? The answer is no. So with the current indentation, it would be first, last. So if you see here, we have user underscore details. That is our main folder, user underscore details. And in this one, what we have the other folder called first underscore name, last name, and age. That's why we have followed the proper spacing. All three of them are aligned in a single line. Okay. So the next thing which we discussed regarding the Boolean. Okay. Let me mention here is email underscore verified for this user. I'll mention true. Okay. And this value it would be treated as Boolean. As mentioned, we are good to mention here yes on. All the three things it would be same. And same in the case of false. All three of them will be treated as same. Okay. Let's continue our discussion with other syntax of YAML. So the fifth syntax is, so what is the exact meaning of list? I would say what we have done now, we have one user underscore details. Okay. But inside this user underscore details, but in real time scenarios, we are going to have n number of users. So how we are going to write a YAML for n number of users? So we need to use list. And we have the two options. One, we are good to mention using hyphen or within the square bracket. So let's do a quick demo to understand it. You see here, I have mentioned about one user. I'm going to mention about one more user. Here, it would be called as Amit Kumar and age 31 and is email verified? No, it is false. So as we have discussed, to mention the list, what we have to do, we have to use hyphen. And then again, we have to follow the proper indentation. Okay, so in this case, this one, it would be my first list and this one will be my second list. Okay, want to add one more attributes of hobbies. Then what we have to write? We have to write hobbies colon. We are good to, as I mentioned, we are good to use a square bracket for single values. I would say cricket, chess. For this user, I'm going to mention hobbies column. We are good to mention the same thing, cricket hyphen. Okay, you see here what happened. These are the details. This is the entry for first user, and this is the entry for second user. Okay, but inside this first user, we have one key called hobbies, and here we are passing multiple value for it. So I have mentioned this one inside the list. As I mentioned, we are good to mention hyphen and a square bracket. So here I have mentioned the things in a square bracket. In the same way, if you want to pass the hobbies, then we are good to mention hyphen. Hyphen means list. Okay. So both of them are correct. Till now, what we have discussed is syntax of YAML. Why we need to understand the syntax of YAML? To write a YAML file. Okay. And what is the purpose of this YAML file? The YAML file is basically responsible to connect to our target APIs. Okay. So let's take example. We have written a YAML file of Kubernetes, which is going to interact to our target Kubernetes API. Okay. Right now, we do not need to focus on how to write a YAML file for Kubernetes. Okay, we are going to have a detailed discussion how to write the YAML for Kubernetes, what is the meaning of API version, kind, metadata specification, and all. But firstly, we need to understand what is the syntax of. Okay, so if you see on the first line, it is API version colon v1. So what it is? I'm just going to pass comment. It is e and is e and value. The same thing we have here. The same thing we have for the second line. It is key and value. Third one also, what it is an object. Why? Because it has the key and then it has the collection of key and value. So it will be called as object. Again, the line 4 will be called as key and value, and the line 5 will be called as object. Okay, and again, the line number 6 will be called as an key and value. And line number 6 again, it will be called as object. Okay, And here on line number 8, you will say what it is. It is an object, but it is not correct. I would say it is partially correct because this is list of an object. Why? Because here if you see on line number 9, we have hyphen, and we already have a very detailed discussion. If you are going to mention hyphen or a square bracket, it will represent what? A list. That's why line number 8 containers will be called as list of an object. Okay. Again, line number 9, it will be called as key value. Line number 10, again, it will be called as key value. And line number 11, next what we have, it is a collection of lists, so it will be called as list of object. Let me mention found, paste here. And this one, it will be called as key value. And again, this one, line number 13, it will be called as list of an object because the entries which we have mentioned using hyphen. And again, the same thing for line number 14 and line number 10. So in this example, what we have done, we have the YAML file which is written for the Kubernetes API interaction. Right now, we are not focusing, as I have mentioned, what is the API version, kind, metadata. But our first objective is to understand the syntax of. We are able to understand. This one is key value object. This one we have list of an object. What is the logic behind it? Why? What is the meaning of hyphen? What is the meaning of this indentation too? If you see API version, I would say most important thing which we need to understand is indentation. You see here, our API version, kind, metadata, and specification are on the same level, which means all of them are on the same. Means all of them are on the same hierarchy. But as you are able to see on line number 3, there is a proper indentation because this metadata details are provided by name and labels. And again, in labels, detail are provided by app colon nginx. That's why there is proper indentation. If I would say, if you are going to mention like this, do you think it would be correct? No, it would not be. Okay. Then the next one which we have mentioned under the specification, we have containers, and then in containers, what we have right now only single container, but this list hyphen means list. So we are good to mention one more container detail. If you want, it would be like this. Okay. So the syntax, it would be like this. Okay. I know at initial stage when you are going to write the YAML file, it would be a bit confusing. It would be a bit challenging to make sure our whole file has proper indentation and all. So I have one of the online editor name called as YAML lint, where you're good to paste your YAML file and good to check is it the YAML file has the proper indentation. Okay. See what it is saying? It is saying our YAML file is valid. Let me intentionally do some mistake and try to understand. What I'm going to do, if you see here, my hyphen and this hyphen means my first container information and my second container information, both of them are correct because we have followed the proper indentation. Okay, let me intentionally do one mistake. Let me press on space. Right now, both of them are not aligned to each other. Second container values are not proper aligned with the first one and it is not correct. Okay, let me copy this one and check in our online. Okay, let me click on go. See where we are getting this error. We are getting this error on line 16. Line 16 on this one. Why? Because we have not followed the proper indentation. What we have to do on line number 16 right now, the container 1 details and the container second details, both of them are aligned to each other. So let me copy it and paste it again in our line tool and let me click on see our YAML file is valid. So as I have mentioned, if you have noticed in our initial discussion, when I was doing a quick comparison between JSON file, XML file, and YAML file, I mentioned to you YAML we are good to. It is very easy to read. It is very easy to write. But we have to follow only one thing, which is proper indentation. If you're following this proper indentation, you'll not get any kind of error or any challenges. But in JSON and YAML, it is a bit complicated to read, to write, and the most important thing, to understand. Okay, so we are left with two more syntax. Let me do it quickly. So we had a very detailed discussion regarding list. So the sixth one is multi-line string. So what is the exact meaning of it? I would say I'm passing one value user underscore name colon Akash. Okay, and I'm passing password password as admin 123. Okay, so how we are going to pass this value? To pass this value as a multi-line string, we have to use this pipe symbol. Okay, this pipe symbol will represent this one will be treated as first line, this one will be treated as second. Whenever we are writing any YAML pipe and we are passing anything after this pipe symbol, it will be treated this one as one first line and this one will be treated as second line. But if we are going to mention as greater one, so although in the YAML file it will be mentioned as username colon Akash and password colon 123 in a separate line, but all both of them will be treated as like this: username colon Akash, then password colon admin 123. Okay, so if you're going to mention greater than, it will be treated as a single line, and the last syntax is the seventh one. Real-time scenarios, we are not going to write a single YAML file. Okay, let's take example of Kubernetes. Okay, whenever you are writing a Kubernetes, sorry, Kubernetes configuration file, it will have n number of YAML file, like our deployment dot YAML file, I would say service dot YAML file. Then the third one, it would be HPA dot YAML file. Then I would say service account dot YAML file. So do you think it is a good idea to write or to create 4 YAML file? YAML file? The answer is no. So in this case, what we are going to do, we are going to write a single YAML. Okay, I'm going to write a single YAML file, and in this YAML file, I'm going to mention about the deployment configuration. Then I'm going to mention 3 hyphens. Then again, I'm going to mention regarding the service. I'm going to mention 3 hyphens. Then again, it would be HPA. Then the 3 hyphens. It's this one. And I'll mention regarding this service account. So the so all the 4 YAML file configuration will be, I would say, all the 4 YAML file configuration will be present in a single YAML file. How we are going to achieve? Using this 3. Okay, let's do a quick demo to understand the multi-line string, multi-line string, and multiple YAML documents. Okay, already have one file name called as multistring.yaml. If you see from line number 1 to 5, it should make sense to you. We already have a detailed discussion, but at line number 6, what I have mentioned this pipe symbol. So what is the meaning of this pipe symbol? Line number 7 will be treated as first entry, and then on line number 8 will be treated as, second entry. Okay, if I'm going to mention here greater than, although I have mentioned the 7 and 8 values in a separate line, but its entry will be in a single, like this. Let me write it on Visual Studio Code. Say config 2, and here I'm going to mention here the greater one. So if I'm going to mention in 2 separate lines, but its entries will be like this. Okay, so this is the difference between using this pipe symbol and greater than. The last syntax of YAML which we discussed is multiple YAML documents. You see here, we have deployment YAML file. Then in the same YAML file, I have mentioned service, then HPA, then namespace, then again the deployment one. So if you see here, we have around 5 YAML file. What we have done, at the end of each YAML file, I have mentioned 3 hyphens. So it means this one represent one YAML file. Again, this one will represent the starting of new YAML, and this one will be again the starting of new YAML. The one benefit is rather than writing 5 YAML files, what we have done, we have written only single YAML file, and we have separated each YAML file using hyphen. Okay. So with this, we have completed our discussion regarding the YAML. Okay. So thanks a lot for watching the video.